do that? How do you if I decide that I wanna be have you seen that movie, The Astronaut Farmer?
Yes, right, right. Okay.
Okay. If I wanna Billy Bob this thing and start going out in my backyard, like, how do you not like, how do you do that?
Well, it turns out that the process for doing small sats, amateur small sats, is actually fairly well known at this point. There have been, they actually sell kits, CubeSat kits.
Whoa.
There's a specific form factor. It's like a 12 by 12-inch cube. And these CubeSats, you can basically put anything you want to in them. There are some limitations, of course. When you're dealing in space, you're in a very hazardous environment. There's lots of radiation. There are micrometeorites that hit you. And when a micrometeorite hits you at 7 or 8 kilometers a second, it really ruins your day.
Yeah.
So there are some significant problems, not to mention outgassing, because your part, when it's made here on Earth, and then you put it in a vacuum, and it's not made to run in a vacuum. So the little bit of gas that may be inside the chip itself will then outgas through the component, and the component blows up.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's all kinds of little things like that that come into play. You can fix a lot of that by using conformal coating. So you can take an epoxy and basically coat your satellite electronics in this epoxy, and it will keep most of that from happening. But still, you're trying to get lift, and right now the big problem that the world faces in general is lift. If you take a look, for instance, well, of course, we don't have the space shuttle anymore. The Deltas, the Delta 4 rockets, those are relatively old technology. Atlas rockets are still being used. Those are really old technology. They're very, they're reasonably stable, but those things still blow up. We have, one of our cases for one of the OG2 satellites, we were on a Russian booster, and the Russian booster had ourselves and 12 other satellites on it, and it blew up on the pad.
Wow.
So it was not just our satellite; a whole bunch of people's satellites got lost. But when people think about space today, we still tend to think in terms of, well, we did all that stuff in the Apollo era and Gemini and Apollo, and that was back in the '60s. Surely we know how to build a rocket today that won't blow up. But the reality is, when you run fuel through turbo pumps and all of the mechanisms that are required to launch one of these things, and the temperatures are thousands of degrees Celsius at the nozzle when the fuel is being burnt, things go wrong. Stuff happens, and when it happens, it usually happens in a very spectacular way, and the whole thing blows up. So the moral of the story is, don't be too close to any launch, because you never know what it's going to do.
No, I got my wedding ring, made out of tungsten because they had, like, some really high melting point, and they said that it was used in, like, nozzles